Are you ready?
Hello, and welcome to the Whole House Podcast, where you can find home, health, and family all in one place. Our team is comprised of moms from different upbringings and backgrounds, and we each have different passions and giftings and strengths. We each represent a different room, and we all make up the whole house. So grab a cup of coffee and join our overly caffeinated ladies here for the Whole House Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the Whole House Podcast. Today is Kathleen.
And Amerey and Glenna, of course.
Always Glenna. And if you listen really closely, you can hear Grandpa in the other room reading books to the other kids. And maybe even to Hunter. Sorry, I just had to say that.
He's sitting there secretly listening to Mr. Grumpy's motor car.
Well, he said Mr. Grumpy was his kind of guy. I know, that's so funny.
It's so funny.
So today we are doing another Superpowers of Motherhood.
Yes.
But we're doing the Adoption Foster Care Edition because we already recorded the Superpowers of Motherhood podcast. And during that podcast, Amerey asked me a couple questions about adoption and foster care. And I said, that's a whole other podcast. Yes. So today we're doing the whole other podcast.
I know, Glenna.
Because it's a little different when you have kids in your family who have come from traumatic beginnings. Your superpowers sometimes feel as if they have fizzled out.
Yes.
And that you can't zap anything with your superpowers. So, yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that is different and how you can approach things in a different manner.
Yes. And how yes. Because when you're dealing with your own biological kids, sometimes we did talk about on the other Superpowers of Motherhood that there are some fruits that you don't see for a couple of years, but there are some fruits that you see not like instantaneously being a couple weeks or something like that with motherhood. But I think that with adoption and kids who are adopted, it's a little bit different.
It is, because you may be waiting for 15 years before you see some fruit, and you go through some really discouraging times because you are planting the seeds and you're being consistent over and over and over again.
Right.
And you're wondering why your child is not progressing in their family age and in their security and feeling safe.
Right.
Because sometimes it just takes years and years and years. But, as someone who's got adult children who were adopted and adult children who are biological, I have seen the fruit in both of them.
Yeah.
And I've seen the positive fruit. And it often takes a lot longer with the kids who have had trauma in their life, bio or not. So you have to consider that. Glenna is singing us a song.
That was Cecilia. Okay, so I'm going to interview, quote unquote, imagine air quotes there, interview Kathleen and ask her some questions about the superpower of motherhood. And I hope I don't catch her off guard too much with this question. I want to start before you even get your adopted kids. And I want to ask you a question about what do you think your superpowers are before you even get your kids, while you're working to get them, because in any adoption process, it's a long process. And mothers often feel like they're just sitting there helpless. And I want to know what you think about, do you have superpower? Are your superpowers working in those moments?
Your superpowers are definitely working in those moments. People may not see them, but I think your main superpower at that time is patient endurance and faith. Because when you tell somebody that you're going to adopt a child, and this thing drags out for 2 years or 3 years, and they just the first question that people ask you when they see you is when are you getting your kids? Is this real? Are you sure you're going through the proper authorities? Is this legal? Are you doing this the right way? Do you have an attorney? Did you go through INS? They ask you all of these bizarre questions, which if you have adopted or if you're in the process, you know that you are fastidious about filling out forms and forms and forms and forms. So you've got all these things covered. So I would say patience, endurance, and faith are your superpowers during that time, because you have this whole belief that you are supposed to mother this child that you haven't met before. So you are waiting, you're enduring, you're patient, even though people are questioning you, questioning your sanity and saying weird things to you like, those won't be your real children, or what if they don't look like you? And you just have to remain firm. You have to remain steadfast. So those are your superpowers during the wait. And I'll just tell you one little story. Whenever we were waiting to be matched with kids in Poland, like everything had been sent over to Poland, everything had been approved, and we were just waiting to be matched with kids. I had this dream one night that I had gone out into the backyard and it was just covered with little snakes. And these little snakes were all just like biting at my ankles. And so the next morning, that dream really stuck with me, and I called a friend, and she said that those snakes represented discouragement, and that I was just really battling discouragement, and she was spot on, because I really was. And that is why, your superpower of motherhood is, you're projecting, faith is the hope of things that we can't see. We can't see adoption yet. It's in the future. And you're wearing this t-shirt that says, I'm a mom, because you're believing that you're supposed to be a mom, and it's easy to get discouraged. It's easy. So you need to find people to pray with you, who have already adopted, who will lift you up. Join it. There's all kinds of support groups online. The whole house has a support group online, so ask to join that, an adoption support group, and that will help you with your superpower of being patient and endurant and having faith.
Okay, I had to.
We had a screamer.
I had to remove my child.
She was excited about the books on the bookshelf, which is a good thing.
She's still banging on the door over there and screaming at me. So I might still have to go get her. So I lost my train of thought a little bit. But, so bear with me while I catch back up. But, on to the next question. So when you have your adopted children finally in your grasps, and
you've grasped them.
You're grasping them. It's not the same as, obviously, but unless you are adopting a newborn, but still, it's not the same as somebody placing a new baby on your chest and you're starting just this fresh new life, and you have every bit of influence that affects them. It all comes from you. Your kids are already coming to you with all these influences that have, and everything else that have been putting into your life or to their life, and they have a way of thinking, and they have, like, whether most likely negative, and they have views of the world, and kids just get stuck in these views of the world, like my nephew, who firmly believed for a long time that all foxes were orange.
Right.
And was very, very angry when we tried to tell him about the Arctic fox. But so kids just get stuck into these ways of thinking. And so I guess my next question is, how do you use your superpower to change your child's way of thinking and to start? This is a loaded question, so you're probably going to answer this one for a while, is what I mean, is how do you start peeling away those influences and building up new walls and new thought processes and new channels of thought how do you use your superpower to do that?
Okay, that is a very
Yes.
unique superpower. Well, I would say, first of all, you were saying you bring these kids home, especially when you have adopted older kids like I did, then they already have a history. They already have their own way of perceiving the world based on the trauma in their past.
And the hard
shaped
thing,
them.
and the hard thing is that you know nothing. I mean, maybe like somebody could have given you general information,
Right.
but you were not in those moments. You did not hear all those words that were spoken to them or see every deed that was done to them. You know nothing of their past.
So you're trying to make me cry here?
I'm trying to make you cry. No.
Well,
I'm not.
I already cried about this in another, podcast, and I'm sure I will again. That first of all, you might have to grieve their past with them. You do have to. I shouldn't say might. You do have to grieve their past with them. And it's very difficult because mother's guilt transcends over bloodlines. It's because even though you didn't birth these children, you are still going to feel that mother guilt, like, why wasn't I there? Why I should have been able to stop that, all of these traumatic things that happened to them. I wish I could have been there. And you can literally beat yourself up about it emotionally day after day after day. So you need to take some time to grieve that and say, you know what, God, you were there. I trust that you brought these kids into my home for a reason and for a purpose. And even though I wasn't there, you were there. So, and that leads you into a period of observation. So when you first bring these kids home, you need to take some time and observe the way that they react to things and figure out what they are believing.
Right.
Because as we know, abuse says, I don't like you. And neglect says, you don't exist. So are these kids acting on the premise of neglect? Are they trying to make sure you know they exist? Then make sure you know they exist. I remember my youngest when he figured out, because he had been in an orphanage just full of babies, and it was a very set schedule, and lights went out at a certain time, and it was eerily quiet in there because the babies knew that nobody's going to come and pick them up. So when he finally discovered, after we brought him home, because he was sleeping from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. at 17 months, and then he was taking 2 naps during the day, long naps, which is not normal for that age.
I was going to say, that's like Glenna is 13 months and she's growing out of, she doesn't sleep through the night, and she's growing out of 2 naps.
So, so that's more normal.
Yeah.
So what happened was when he realized, like if he scrunched too loud on the mattress, and I would be checking on him a lot, like make sure this kid's breathing because he was sleeping so much. Then he caught on to the fact that, hey, if I make noise, then someone will come and get me. So then he kind of 180'd and didn't want to sleep at all. Which was difficult for a period of time, but once I used my superpower of observation and realized, okay, nobody was coming to get him when he was in the orphanage because they didn't have the staff to do that, not because they didn't care, then he needed that. He needed to go back to, as a newborn, where
every 2 hours.
Every 2 hours, just getting up and constantly comforting him and talking to him and begging him to go back to sleep. So I would say that, and like you said, that what you ask is a very loaded question. Because in order to change a child's beliefs, it's not just by telling them your beliefs are erroneous. You think about when you go to church and you hear the pastor speak, unless you have a revelation of what he's talking about, you're probably not going to make a real change in your life. But when you do have a revelation, like the Holy Spirit reveals to you, oh my goodness, that is so true. I need to apply that to my life. I need to repent. I need to change my way of thinking. Then we do that. Well, kids are not going to do that if you just tell them your belief is wrong. First of all, they don't even know what their belief is. They're just acting out what they believe. So the way that you change that is you work on making them feel secure, making them know that they are loved by repeating repeating, even when you don't feel like it, even when they're acting out, that unconditional love. You did that thing and here's your consequence, but I still love you.
Yeah. I think that it's important to note that for dads, because we're talking about the superpowers of motherhood, and the thing is that we don't parent all on our own, and that our husbands are there with us, and which is needed, and it's wonderful, and it's sometimes frustrating when we're like, I know how to do this, and you're coming in and messing up my thing. But it's important to note for dads and even some moms, which I think that if you're listening to this, or if you've been following the Whole House, then you have probably been shaken out of this belief, but your husband might not have, is that typically dads, when you bring a kid home into your home and they start living in your home, whether you have, especially if you have other kids, that the dads assume that they should start acting the way that the other kids are acting, or that you expect them to act instantaneously, because they're like, well, they're here, they were here, and they are able to observe the other siblings, or they're able to talk to us, or we have been like, we've rescued them. They're not in that negative situation anymore. And so dads just think that it should be an instant thing. And I think that even mothers who have come from backgrounds without adoption or know nothing of adoption expect that too. But so just be patient with your husband, and maybe try and get him to listen to this. Encourage him to say, this is something I want you to listen to with me, because it's just, again, we've talked many times in many of our past podcasts about how women and men think differently.
Right.
And so it's just a different way of a man thinking. Just like, I mean, right now, I only have biological kids. And, my oldest is almost 5, but sometimes my husband comes home from work and she just acts like a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, where she doesn't listen automatically, or she doesn't do things, and he just gets frustrated, and he's like, well, she should be doing this because we've been doing this with her ever since she was born. I'm like, no, she shouldn't. But to him, it should be an almost instant thing, or because we've been consistent, that it should be happening right then. And it's just because men think differently than women. Women see the emotional draws and the everything that's mixed in with the bad behavior, and men just see that behavior and think we can fix
Women
it.
are relationship minded.
Yes.
And men are fixers. Like, give me a hammer, I will fix that thing. And I mean, I don't mean they're going to hammer someone, but you know what I mean.
Yes, exactly.
And Amerey's made some really good points. I'm going to kind of backtrack on one of the points was, if you are going to talk to your husband about this, then you need to have all your ducks in a row. Because when he gets home from work and you just start saying, this kid did this, and you're bawling your eyeballs out, and it sounds like, and I can't do this anymore. I mean, I've been there. I've done that. I know. It's hard not to do that. Yeah. But here's the thing. Men like to gather facts, have all the information, and unfortunately for us, this is just a truth. They're not always going to listen to us, even if we know the facts. That's why it's important. Amerey said, find some videos, find some podcasts, or find a book if your husband's a reader. Say, can we do this together? Yeah. Because my husband struggled with this for a long, long time. And when we went to our first Empowered to Connect conference in Washington, D.C. years and years ago, and he heard all of these other people.
But that was still after all of the kids were... Most of the kids were grown up.
Most of the kids were grown. But it really clicked for him. All the things that I had been saying for years and years, and reading to him, like at night when we were going to bed, and I would pick up this book, Nurturing Adoptions, and be like, oh my gosh, listen to this. Right. Or The Connected Child, oh my goodness, listen to this. Right. This is our kid. This is this. This is this. And it really, whenever we went to that conference, it just all clicked together. And then we ended up going to be trained to be Empowered to Connect trainers ourselves. But it's just, so find some information or material that will give him the facts without it just being you, because it's in our husband's defense, when we are an emotional mess one day and the next day we're just like, here are the facts, and they're like, okay, she's going to lose it any minute.
Yes.
So
yes, I called Seth yesterday or 2 days ago, I was having a bad day, and I called him when he was on his lunch break, and I was just talking to him, and he was like, he was like, are you starting your period?
he's getting the facts.
And I told him, I was like, no, don't assume that just because I'm weeping that I'm about to start my period. Some days I just have bad days. And I mean, what else is he supposed to assume? So yes, we're supposed to. And also, when I called him, or whenever I call him and we're talking to him when he gets home, and I just had a weepy day, and none of the kids, his first response is, well, I don't know what you want me to do about it. Like, I can't go back and fix your day. So why are you telling me about it?
Right. And it's, another important point about trying to tell our husband about these things is do find that material for them to either listen to or read, because this is very common in the adoption realm. The child who is melting down or manipulating or has all of these behaviors for you may not have it for him when he's at home.
Yeah.
I have seen that happen over and over again. So then the husband's just like scratching his head going, what?
Right.
It's all in your head, or it's all just you, or you're doing something wrong.
That happens a lot even with children who have capital letter syndromes and things like that. I have a close friend who, I'm not sharing names or anything like that, but she came to me and we were talking about getting a diagnosis for her child and all of those kind of things, and she was just sharing that the hard thing was getting. Now, her husband was already at this point where he agreed to have the child diagnosed and stuff, but she said it was such a hard battle to get him to that point because, A, as a side note, men just don't want to admit that something's wrong with their kid.
Right.
But B, because whenever her husband was home, those behaviors weren't prevalent.
Right.
They weren't right there in his face. They weren't all that, because he wasn't experiencing all the stressful moments of all of those things. It was daddy's home. It's a happy time. We're eating dinner. We're cuddling in bed, playing tickle, and then we're going to bed. Those weren't even there. And even on weekends, they go and do you go in as a family and you do happy things, and it distracts a little bit from those behaviors. And I think that's very true even with adopted children.
Right, it is very true. And it's just like, your own family members may say to you, I don't see any of these attachment issues. I don't see any of these things that you say you're struggling with, because when they're with that particular child, it's a holiday and everybody's giving the kid cake and cookies. He's watching all the movies. He's doing everything. And when everybody goes home, and then you're suffering the consequences for weeks because that child is dysregulated, his schedule's been disrupted. So I would add that, one of the superpowers of motherhood period is being able to try to organize your day to fit the needs of your children. And if that means having a strict schedule, then have a strict schedule as much as you possibly can, because that makes a child feel more secure when he knows what's going to happen next. And, after the holidays, you even have to take a couple more extra days off for that child to begin to regulate again. So that's one of your superpowers. And one of the other things I was thinking about before we started recording was, when we talk about the superpowers of motherhood, we have our own family government. Yeah. We're the boss and we're the employee. We recorded a podcast on that. You can go back and find that one. It's a little bit different in the adoption realm, because your kids coming from different backgrounds are going to have different ideas. So if you're just like, the Guires always do it this way. This is how we handle things.
That's such a Guire thing.
Yes. This is just, it's going to take your kid years.
Yeah.
We say that when a child comes into your home, their family age for you is 0.
Yeah.
So if you get them when they're 8, 4 years down the road when they're 12, their family age is still only 4.
Yeah.
So you've got to take that time, and it's a commitment. It's investment parenting.
Yeah.
To keep, but that doesn't mean you just give up and change all of your ways and say, well, we're not going to do things this way anymore, or we don't believe this anymore because it doesn't work for this kid. You have to remain firm and consistent and parent with a lot of grace.
Yeah.
Because one example of that is, if you have toddlers and you listen to, a common thing to do is to learn nursery rhymes and learn scripture songs and things like that. If you bring in a kid into your home and they're already 6 years old and they have never done any of those things, and you're like, this is how our family does things, well, then you're going to have to backtrack. You're going to have to backtrack, and you're going to be like, our family reads poetry together, but we're going to start at the beginning.
Yeah.
And we're going to backtrack and teach you all these nursery rhymes, the Itsy Bitsy Spider, get out a Mother Goose book. I remember that was one of the things we did. We had this giant Mother Goose book that all of my bio kids had already gone through more than once. We had to get it back out and start all over again. And that's okay. You're allowed to do that. You are the boss and the employee. So just remember that that is a superpower. Backtracking is a superpower. And don't worry about other people judging you or telling you whether you're right or wrong. Right. You just do what's best for your family and your kids at that time.
Yeah. Now, the next question I have is, I told you that was a loaded question.
That was a loaded question.
It is coming off of what we were just talking about right before you talked about backtracking, is the ways that kids act differently in public and things like that. When you have an adopted child and you go out, you first start taking them out to your church and your homeschool group if you homeschool, and all of the places that you usually go, they're usually standing right by you and super clingy and all of those kind of things. But eventually they start
regulating,
and some
cinnamon sugar waffle.
What time is it? Sorry. Can you wait for me for just a few minutes, and I will get you a good.
I'm gonna sit here and look at books.
Okay. So, but then eventually those behaviors start to come out a little bit more. And so it starts out with with you maybe sharing with some of your close friends or something. This is what we're going through at home. I'm having a hard time. When mommies get together, they talk, but then it turns to, and at first they're saying, well, I don't see that. You're fine. You're overreacting and all of those kind of things. And then it turns to them noticing the behaviors and being critical of your child and things like that. So my question is, what are your superpowers for your children in public? Because you have you mom differently. Even everybody moms differently at home than they mom in public. And I just had somebody ask me, like, I'm dealing with these issues with my child, and it's been this great big thing. But whenever somebody talks to me, it feels like they're trying to encourage me, but all they say is, I don't see what you're seeing. He's fine.
Exactly. I find that that's very common.
Yes.
I would say that in the adoption world, especially when you adopt older children who have had a lot of trauma, when you first adopt, you're considered a saint.
Yeah.
But then you very quickly turn to a wicked sinner because people think that you can't parent. And this is a common thing. It's very, very exasperating. I think there's a little bit more leeway, a lot more people understanding what trauma does to children nowadays than when we first adopted. But still, you can be friends with the same people for years and years and years, and you adopt kids, and at first, like you said, they're clingy, and then the honeymoon period is over, and those behaviors start coming out, and then suddenly those exact same people are telling you, you just need to this or you just need to that, and you can't parent.
Right.
And that's very, very discouraging and frustrating. And I think that your superpower then is find a community of people who are in the same situation that you are, and those women and then, families will encourage you because they're going through the same thing, and they're going to say, me too. And I think that consistency is key. You were saying that often we parent differently at home than we do out in public.
Yeah.
I think that you have to, your superpower needs to be to override that and be the same everywhere, because kids from hard places are going to pick you out and take you down.
They know the buttons.
They will take you down.
Right.
And so you have to be consistent. And I really worked hard on that. I never was perfect. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying I achieved it. But because kids will know, they will know. And not that they're doing it subconsciously. I'm not saying that kids are just like sitting in a room making a list. Next time we're out in public, do this to mom. It's just like it's all subconscious.
Right.
And so you have to maintain that. And I would say that especially if you do a major event like a field trip that's out of town, that you have to do a lot of prep for your kids. Some of my kids did not do well with those kind of field trips because they were so hyper vigilant. They didn't enjoy it and they didn't learn anything. And at the same time, you need to make sure that they have time to recover from those and that you have time to recover from those, because it is exhausting to be out in public and to be thinking, what is this kid going to do? And it's not so much that you don't like the kids. It's not that at all. It's that you do not know how other adults are going to treat your child and react to your child. Because I had one who was just very hyper vigilant at homeschool co-op, and he was very much struggling. He would tell me he didn't understand what the teacher was saying. He didn't understand what the assignment was. Nothing was clear to him. He wasn't learning anything. But then when I approached his teacher and we were emailing back and forth, she said, "Oh, he's such a good kid. He's so quiet. He's so well behaved." And I'm thinking, the kid is not learning anything.
He's just sitting there going through a million things are going through his brain. He can't concentrate.
Is someone going to come in the door? Is someone
That's
going to
why he's sitting here quiet, terrified.
Right.
Like, oh my gosh.
So I think that superpower is consistency, being the same, and not bowing down to people's expectations. If your child has a meltdown in the middle of a field trip or in the middle of, riding a bus somewhere, you do whatever that child needs. And if someone comes to you and says, you just need to discipline them, then you just need to just tell them they need to back off.
Yeah, so one of the things that I just encouraged somebody with was, you are responsible for your child, and you're responsible for your family, and you're not responsible, and this may seem very harsh when we are Christians and we are supposed to do unto others as we would have them do unto us, but you're not responsible for other people's feelings.
Exactly.
So if they come to you and they're trying to give you advice, or they're telling you things like, oh, I just think that he's just fine, and you're just overthinking it, and you're just, maybe had a bad mom day or something like that, or you're, it is 100% okay, and also 100% needed for you to say, you know what, thank you, but you don't understand.
Right.
So you need to, you just need to stop.
Until you walk a mile in my shoes, you want to come over and you want to take over, and that you wouldn't let them. But anyway, it just kind of gets that concept in their mind. They don't understand.
Yeah.
And the truth is, we are strong.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of that song. What is that song?
We are strong, heartache to heartache, we stand. Yeah.
That song. It just popped in my mind. So if a mom comes to you and says, I am struggling, my child is struggling, they waited until they're hanging on by their fingernails before they told you that. And I did not go out, and I probably undershared when my kids were little because I wanted to cover them, and I didn't want anybody to look down on them or judge them or put them in a box. but that kind of backfired. So you got to find that middle ground, because what did happen is there were all kinds of behaviors coming out that they were displaying in public, and then I was constantly getting phone calls and emails from
and
people.
it was because of that, what you just said a while ago about the family government and your family, like how people viewed how people view your family. And they're like, well, that kid isn't acting like a Guire.
Exactly.
And you have to sit and,
Right.
And,
so when a couple kids decided to steal a case of hot chocolate from church because they were in survival mode.
Those
and
horrible children.
They're just like, hey, there's a case of hot chocolate sitting here. And
if it's not there, you grab it and it's yours.
Right. And they're communist kind of thinking,
yes,
because
exactly.
they came from a communist setting in an orphanage where it was first come, first served.
Right.
Then they brought it home, and they weren't super old.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I noticed all the kids are making hot chocolate all the time.
They didn't even think that it was wrong to do it, because they were just
they
like,
made it an open.
Right.
They were just like, here, you want some hot chocolate?
And they shared with all their brothers and sisters.
Hot chocolate. And I'm thinking, how much hot chocolate did I buy at the store? But then it was like you were saying, it's like people were judging because, the Guires don't act that way. They know that thou shalt not steal.
Right.
But those new Guires did not know thou shalt not steal. What they knew was first come, first serve. It's sitting there. Let's just take it home.
And now we have hot chocolate.
We have a limitless supply of hot chocolate.
Yes, exactly.
I'm going to see what time it is.
Okay.
So we're going to wrap this one up because the natives are getting restless and hungry. And this is our second podcast recording of today. So we thank you for joining us, and I hope this brief little blip has given you something to think about. And if you have any comments or questions or any requests for something you would like us to talk about, please let us know. So thanks for joining us today.
Yes, thank you, and sorry for the abrupt ending. Yes. But we did cover a lot.
We did, and the children are hungry.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
We're so glad you could join us here for the Whole House podcast. Please subscribe, and if you give us a review, we might pick our favorite and send you a prize. Please remember to like the Whole House Facebook page and follow us on Instagram at _whole_house. And please sign up with your email on our website, thewholehouse.org, to be notified when new things are happening here at the Whole House. Thanks so much for listening.